My first memory, I guess, or my first experience with mental illness started pretty young, but I think I was too young where I didn't understand what was really going on. I want to say grade 3 to 5. I was experiencing depression, but I didn't know it at the time. I just felt a lack of motivation and that gloominess, and I didn't get why, and I didn't know how to shake it. But I think I knew it was okay, or I knew it was not okay. I knew it was weird to talk about, so I didn't talk about it with anyone. But I do remember in one of those like scholastic book fairs, I bought a joke book with my mom's money, and I read it front to back, thinking that it would like relieve me of this gloominess. Like reading a bunch of jokes, like it would make me happy, but it didn't. And then when I was a little bit older, I want to say age 9 to 10, I started dieting for the first time. And I did have, I guess, body image issues before then. But at that age, I learned how from someone in my family. Yeah, and that's when it started. And that just grew over time to when I was in high school. The dieting became a little intense. And I would do things like I would take my meals to my bedroom and I would eat in front of the mirror naked to lose my appetite. I would use laxatives a lot, which is gross. I would exercise intensely. I would eat like very, very, very little calories. I think there was days where my calorie goal was like 100, which is pretty much impossible. It was sort of like an on and off thing until I grew into university, and I had some things going on there where I like dropped out of school and I was out of school for a while and then I went back into school. But that was sort of an intense time for me where I still had the depression, I still had the dieting, and then I had like a buttload of anxiety join in. And I think I had suicidal ideations before when I was in high school. But in university, it became pretty, I don't want to say intense, but pretty reoccurring. And it became a comfort for me. It actually became not a crutch, but a coping mechanism where I felt like everything I'm going through now is fine and I can cope with it because I knew that I had a plan B. And I knew that like at any point I didn't have to cope with it anymore. And it's like so fucked up because it helped me get through my day where I felt like, okay, I can do this, I can handle this, because if I don't feel like it tonight, I don't have to. Luckily, I never went so far where I had like a plan where I actually was gonna execute anything. But it got to a point where I felt like, I don't know if it felt like the only logical conclusion, but it did feel logical. It felt like for a bit, like I almost felt guilty for existing. And I felt like if I did kill myself, then for the first little while, it'll be sad for my friends and my family. But then after a bit, like maybe they'll be happy. And I didn't mean that as like a cynical, like, oh yeah, I fucking suck. But I genuinely thought like maybe after a while they'll realize that like I wasn't meant to be on this earth, and I was feeling guilty about everything. My family will save money because they don't have to pay for my groceries or whatever. My friends will get used to not having me around, and I thought sooner than later they'll just forget about me and it'll be fine. So I would actually be doing this like service, this duty to the earth. So the thoughts got more and more prevalent that it got to a point where I felt like my only option was to like keep going with the thoughts, which I knew was dangerous, or to like talk to a doctor and tell someone. Yeah, so eventually I talked to someone. I talked to my doctor. I got diagnosed. I have anxiety and depression, but it is just my doctor and not like a psychologist, so we never dug deep into it, and I don't want to see a psychologist anyways. So now I'm on medication and I'm feeling better, and some days are still a struggle, but yeah, medication changed things. It took a while for me to get on meds because I think there's this like, people tell you that like when you're on meds, you're not yourself, or you become a zombie or whatever. But I felt like I wasn't myself before meds. And when I was on medication, or now that I'm on medication, I feel more like myself. Like I can do things I want to do. Like I never thought after I graduated I'd be able to hold down a full-time job. I never saw myself driving. I have hobbies, which is like pretty fucking sick. Like I never thought I'd have hobbies. I think what really helps me cope, and as cliche as it is to say, and I almost hate saying it out loud, is self-care, but a form of self-care and a form of self-love that is more than taking bubble baths, and like doing face masks, but really loving yourself and realizing what you can do despite what's going on around you, if that makes sense. Or like really reflecting on like what's going on in the world around you. But for example, my body image issues are a result of this like capitalist consumer system telling me that I need to look a certain way and be a certain way in order to be successful, or in order to be attractive. So for me, my form of self-love is really reflecting on like, fuck it, like I can be myself and I can be beautiful and I can care about myself regardless of these images or these lies I'm being told, I guess, just to fit a certain image. So I think that helped me, and I hope that makes sense. So that for me is what I consider like my self-care and my self-love. It's like thinking about the bigger image. But for the most part, and I hate saying this out loud, the pandemic has been really nice for my mental health. Okay, not the pandemic, but the lockdown. And I think, not the lockdown, but the slowing down of things has been really nice for my mental health, because it's given me a chance to slow down, to experience more silence, more calmness. A lot of my anxiety, or I guess it's a big part of my anxiety, is I feel overwhelmed very, very extremely easily. And one of my biggest coping mechanisms is I would keep myself really busy and distract myself with things to try to cope and to try to distract myself from sitting by myself with my own thoughts. So pre-pandemic, I would often make like 2 or 3 plans in one day. Like I would wake up in the morning, and then maybe I have a morning shift, and then after that I would want to go to the gym, and then after that I would hang out with someone, and I never really had time for rest because I was just always doing something and always out and about. But this has kind of forced me to learn how to sit with myself. Yeah, and guess kind of like cope with how to sit with my thoughts and how to listen to myself. I think what I wish I could have told myself before is that if something isn't working, or if like the typical mental health advice isn't working for you, then there's nothing wrong with that. Because you read a lot of like the same things online, or there's a lot of people in real life that mean well but give you advice that doesn't always work for you. Like I felt like doing things like therapy, first of all, like didn't work for me, and I always felt like that was because of me. Like I was so fucked up that like even like the top thing that's supposed to help didn't work for me, and it was probably just because I didn't have a therapist that I got along with. But it like sat with me, and therapy became sort of, I guess, traumatizing in its own way for me. So I still don't like therapy, but it took me a while to sort of learn that that's okay and I don't have to like it, and if I could cope in my own way, that's okay. A lot of people will tell you yoga, exercise, meditation, which are all great options, but if it doesn't work, that's okay. And that also takes a lot to have to like start to do it in the first place. I used to like beat myself up for like the typical things, or the common things that would help other people not helping me. I used to always think it was my fault. I would always, I guess, like individualize it. But I think a lot of people who aren't living with mental illness don't realize how physical it is. And that's things you can't control. A lot of times my anxiety isn't just thinking anxious thoughts. I get really weak. I get really painful stomach aches. I get really bad headaches. Like there are times where I can't move. Thankfully, I haven't experienced it, but there are people that experience some form of like paralysis in a way. I don't think that's a proper word, but where they like physically cannot move their body when things get really bad for them. So yeah, I wish people could keep that in mind when they don't take mental illness properly. I was hospitalized for the first time this year for mental illness, and it was solely 100% physical, and like I didn't know what was going on with my body. When you push suggestions such as like yoga and exercise, and like I said before, like those are okay suggestions. They work for some people, not for other people, but it doesn't work for other people because of your physical state. And yeah, it's shitty. It's okay to put your mental health first, even in ways that may not seem okay to other people, if that makes sense. So for example, when I was in university before, I was in a really bad space, so I dropped out and I felt like I couldn't continue, and that's what I really needed at the time. And a lot of people in my life were questioning me why I was doing so, and there was other reasons. And I wish I could tell myself that just because other people don't understand, that it's okay, and I needed to do that for myself. And even earlier this year, I was in a job position that was really awful for my mental health for a lot of reasons. And I stepped down, and I think to a lot of people, and also to me judging myself, that didn't seem like a good idea because I wasn't sort of following that route that you're supposed to take, where you're supposed to keep trying at work to a higher paid position for that idea of like success. If things don't work out, and if the other options of things that you try don't work out, that's okay. It takes time to find what works for you. And like if you have to do anything to prioritize your mental health, that's okay too.